You sit in the quiet of your apartment, the blue light from your phone casting shadows across your face. Outside, the city hums with 1,000 invisible emergencies, 1,000 small catastrophes playing out in living rooms just like yours. But in here, in this stillness, there is only you and the weight pressing down on your chest. You have become the person everyone calls, not because you asked for this role, but because somewhere along the way, you proved yourself reliable, capable, strong. When your friend's car breaks down at midnight, your phone lights up. When your mother needs someone to navigate the bureaucracy of insurance claims, she thinks of you. When your colleague drowns under deadline pressure, you absorb their overflow without complaint. You are the one who carries things. This is simply who you are or who you have learned to be. Your mental list sprawls across invisible pages. Tasks for yourself, yes, but also tasks for others. Errands that aren't yours. Problems you've volunteered to solve. Emotional labor you've taken on because someone had to, and you were there, and you were strong enough. You tell yourself this is what good people do. This is what it means to be dependable, to be loved, to matter. But tonight the weight has become unbearable. Your shoulders ache with a tension that sleep cannot dissolve. Your mind races through tomorrow's obligations, next week's emergencies, the indefinite future, stretching out like a highway with no rest stops. And beneath all of this, beneath the noise and the doing and the solving, there is a small voice that has been trying to speak for months, maybe years. It says, "I am so tired." You think about reaching out. Your finger hovers over a name in your contacts. Someone who has told you many times, if you ever need anything. But your throat closes. The words "I need help" form in your mind and immediately dissolve, as if your brain has learned to intercept them before they can reach your mouth. 3 simple syllables, and yet they feel heavier than everything you've been carrying. Heavier than your job, your responsibilities, your role as the person who handles things. You lock your phone instead. You tell yourself you're fine. You've survived worse than this. You can figure it out alone the way you always have. The way you've learned, you must. But the small voice persists. Why does suffering alone feel safer than admitting you're not okay? There is something happening inside you that you cannot name. A kind of loneliness that exists even when you're surrounded by people. A kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. You wonder if anyone notices. You wonder if anyone would care if they did. And then you feel guilty for wondering because you know people care about you. They tell you this. They thank you for always being there. They call you strong, resilient, a rock. What they don't see is how the rock is crumbling from the inside. You have built your life around a simple equation. Your value equals your usefulness. Your lovability equals your ability to need nothing while providing everything. This math has worked for so long that you've forgotten it's something you learned, not something you were born with. It has become as natural as breathing. You give until you're empty, and then you give from the emptiness itself. The refrigerator hums in the kitchen. A car alarm chirps outside. Time passes in that peculiar way it does at night when you're alone with thoughts you've been avoiding all day. You look at your hands, these hands that have carried so much, and you wonder when they started feeling like they belonged to someone else. You are not stubborn. You are not proud in the way people use that word as criticism. You have simply learned through years of careful observation that asking for help is dangerous, that needing is dangerous, that showing the soft underbelly of yourself invites pain you cannot afford. This is the thing psychologists have named, though the name doesn't make it less real, doesn't make the armor you wear any lighter. They call it hyperindependence, this pattern of never asking, never leaning, never admitting the weight is too much. It sounds clinical diagnostic, like something happening to someone else. But it's just a word for what you know in your bones, the fear that has shaped you into someone who can hold everyone else but cannot let anyone hold you. And here is the paradox. You live inside the armor that once protected you, has become the thing that isolates you most. You built these walls to keep out disappointment, to guard against the specific pain of reaching out and finding no one there. But now, the walls are so high, so thick, that even when people want to reach you, even when they're standing right outside calling your name, you cannot hear them through the stone. You are tired of being strong. But you are more tired of the alternative, which is being seen in your weakness, and finding that the people you thought would catch you have already turned away. This has happened before, hasn't it? The memory lives in your body more than your mind. A reaching out that was met with silence, a vulnerability that was used against you, a need that made someone uncomfortable, made them see you differently, made them leave, so you stopped reaching. You stopped needing, or at least you stopped showing that you need, and you survived. This is what you tell yourself in the dark hours. You survive by becoming someone who requires nothing, who can weather any storm alone, who never ever asks for help. But survival is not the same as living. And somewhere deep inside you know this. The truth arrives quietly, the way most important truths do. Not as revelation, but as recognition. You are not broken. You are not difficult. You are not the problem you've sometimes feared you might be. You are someone who learned to survive. This distinction matters more than you know. Because what you carry is not a character flaw or a stubborn refusal to accept love. It is something else entirely. It is the scar tissue that forms around old wounds the way bone grows back thicker where it once fractured. Your hyperindependence is not who you are. It is what you had to become when the world taught you that needing was dangerous. The armor you wear was forged in moments you probably don't think about anymore. Moments that seemed small at the time, but left deposits in your nervous system layer upon layer, year after year, until the weight of them shaped you into someone who carries everything alone. You built this fortress one stone at a time, and each stone had a reason. Each stone was placed in response to a moment when you reached out and found nothing there, or worse, found disapproval, impatience, the subtle message that your needs were an inconvenience. And so you learned. The way children learn, which is to say completely without question, in the wordless language of the body and brain, adapting to survive. You can feel it now if you pay attention. That slight tightening in your chest when someone asks, "Are you okay?" The automatic "I'm fine" that comes before you've even assessed whether you are. The way your mind immediately pivots to solving, fixing, managing, rather than acknowledging that something hurts. This isn't conscious choice. This is programming running so deep it feels like instinct. The armor protected you once. This is important to remember. It kept you safe when safety meant not needing anything from anyone. It allowed you to function in an environment where vulnerability was met with absence or discomfort. It gave you the strength to keep going when stopping, when asking for help, would have meant confronting the terrifying possibility that no help was coming. But armor has a cost. It always does. You can be encased in metal and still be wounded. The blows still land, they just land on the inside where no one can see them. The weight accumulates in silence. The exhaustion compounds. And the very thing that once kept you safe begins to keep you isolated, cut off from the warmth of genuine connection, from the possibility that someone might actually want to help you, not out of obligation, but out of love. You feel this isolation most acutely in the gap between how people see you and how you experience yourself. They see someone capable, together strong, someone who has it figured out. You know they see this because they tell you. They say, "I don't know how you do it," and they mean it as a compliment. They say, "You're so strong," and you smile and say thank you because what else can you say? But inside you are something else entirely. Inside you are someone barely keeping it together. Someone held up by willpower and habit and the sheer momentum of having no other choice. Someone who lies awake at 3 a.m, trying to solve problems that aren't even yours because staying busy keeps the deeper questions at bay. The deeper question being, what would happen if I stopped? What would happen if you let the mask slip? If you let someone see how tired you really are, how much you're struggling, how desperately you sometimes want someone else to make a decision or carry something or just tell you that it's going to be okay? Would they still love you? Would they stay? Or would they see your needs as a burden, your vulnerability as weakness, your humanness as something disappointing? This is the fear that keeps the armor locked in place. Not that you're incapable of asking for help, but that asking would confirm your deepest suspicion that you are only valued for what you can do, not for who you are. That love is conditional on your strength, your usefulness, your ability to need nothing while being everything to everyone else. And so you continue. You carry. You exhaust yourself. You tell yourself this is noble, this is strong, this is what good people do. But late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the phone is finally still, you sometimes wonder what it would feel like to let someone else carry you for once. To fall and have someone catch you. To need and not be punished for it. The wondering itself feels like betrayal, like admitting weakness, like the first crack appearing in a dam that has held back an ocean. But here is what you need to understand. The crack is not the breaking. The crack is the beginning of something else, something that might eventually feel like freedom. Because armor that never comes off is not protection. It is a prison, and you have been both guard and prisoner for far too long. The exhaustion you feel is not just physical, it is the exhaustion of holding a pose, of maintaining a performance, of being the version of yourself that you believe is acceptable, while the real you withers in the dark, unwitnessed and unhelped. The armor was not built in a day. It accumulated slowly, the way sediment becomes stone under pressure and time. If you trace it back, if you follow the thread through the years, you will likely arrive somewhere in childhood. Not always, but often. This is where the architecture of self-reliance gets drawn, where the blueprints for a lifetime of solitude are quietly drafted. You were perhaps the child who learned to be small. Not small in stature, but small in need, small in demand, small in the space you took up in a household that had no room for one more thing. Your parents were not necessarily cruel. They may have loved you deeply. But love and presence are not always the same thing, and you learned early to distinguish between them. Maybe your mother worked 2 jobs and came home with exhaustion etched into her face. You could see it even at 5 years old, the way her shoulders sagged as she walked through the door. So, when you fell and scraped your knee when you needed comfort, you learned to wash the wound yourself. You learned to solve your own small emergencies. Not because you were told to, but because you understood in that wordless way. Children understand everything, that adding to her burden would only make the exhaustion deeper. Or maybe your father was present but unreachable, a man who responded to emotion with silence or discomfort. When you cried, the room grew tense. When you asked for attention, you felt the shift in energy, the way your need created a disturbance in the air. Children are exquisitely attuned to these shifts. They learn to read mood the way sailors read weather, and they adjust their sails accordingly. You learned that your sadness made people uncomfortable, that your need created distance, so you stopped showing both. Or perhaps you were the eldest child, parentified, before you understood what that meant. While other children were allowed to be children, you were expected to be a small adult, to help with the younger ones. To be responsible, mature, understanding. To ask for nothing because there were smaller children who needed more. Your needs were indefinitely deferred, and eventually you stopped having them. Or rather, you stopped believing you were allowed to have them. The specific details vary, but the lesson is always the same. Your brain, in its brilliant adaptive wisdom, drew a conclusion from the data it received. Needing makes you a burden. Vulnerability pushes people away. Safety lies in requiring nothing. Love is something you earn by being useful, capable, by taking care of yourself and others, by never adding to anyone else's load. This is not rational thought. This is something deeper, something written into the neural pathways before you had language to question it. It becomes the operating system on which your entire personality runs. And like all early programming, it's nearly invisible to you. It doesn't feel like a belief you chose. It feels like truth, like the way the world simply is. Watch what happens in the brain of a child who reaches out and finds no one there. The nervous system registers this as danger. Not physical danger, but something almost worse, the danger of being alone in a world too big to navigate without help. The limbic system sounds its alarm. The body floods with stress hormones. And then when the child realizes that expressing need doesn't bring help, something shifts. The brain, in its determination to keep you alive, finds another solution. If asking for help is dangerous, if showing vulnerability leads to abandonment or disapproval, then the answer is obvious: stop asking, stop showing. Build walls so thick that you never have to risk that particular pain again. Become your own source of everything you need. This is called self-preservation, and it works beautifully right up until it doesn't. You learn to self-soothe before you could tie your shoes. You learned to problem solve before you learned to read. You became competent, capable, eerily mature for your age. Teachers praised you. Adults marveled at how independent you were, how you never caused trouble, how you always had everything under control. And each compliment reinforced the lesson: your value lies in your autonomy, your strength, your ability to manage alone. But here is what no one told you, what perhaps no one understood: independence forced upon a child who still needs dependence is not strength. It is adaptation to deprivation. It is making the best of circumstances that should have been different. And the child who learns to need nothing grows into an adult who cannot ask for anything, even when asking would save them. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Somewhere in your nervous system, the old equation still runs. Vulnerability equals danger, needing equals rejection, asking equals abandonment. This is why your throat closes when you try to say, "I need help." This is why the words feel impossible, even when they're necessary. Your brain's still running, that ancient programming is trying to protect you from a threat it learned about decades ago. You can understand this intellectually and still feel it in your body. Knowledge doesn't automatically override instinct. You can know rationally that your friends would help you if you asked. You can know that showing weakness won't make people abandon you. But knowing and believing are different countries, and the distance between them is vast. So you continue to carry everything alone, not because you're stubborn, but because your nervous system is still trying to keep you safe from dangers that may no longer exist. The child inside you, the one who learned that needing was too risky, is still making decisions about your life, still choosing isolation over the vulnerability of connection, still believing that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. And that child was right once. In that household, in that context, with those particular people and circumstances, self-reliance was survival. But you are no longer that child. The circumstances have changed even if the programming hasn't. You are surrounded by different people now, people who might actually show up if you let them. But letting them means dismantling the walls you built when you were too young to know you were building a prison. It means risking the very thing you've spent a lifetime protecting yourself from the possibility of reaching out and finding nothing there. But look at what you have become in spite of this, or perhaps because of it. Look at the extraordinary human you have forged from that old deprivation. This matters. This is not nothing. You are the most reliable person in any room. When crisis strikes, when chaos descends, when everyone else is panicking or paralyzed, you are the one who moves into action. You assess the situation with a clarity that comes from years of having to solve problems alone. You find solutions where others see only obstacles. You carry weight that would break most people, and you do it without complaint, without fanfare, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This is real strength. Not the performative kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the deep structural strength of someone who has had to bear their own weight since before they were ready. You have built yourself into something formidable, competent, unshakable. People know they can count on you because you have proven again and again that you will show up. You will follow through. You will not collapse under pressure. You are the lighthouse. This is the metaphor that fits, though you probably don't think of yourself this way. You stand steady in the storm, your light reaching out across dark waters, guiding others to safety. Ships navigate by your constancy. They rely on you to be exactly where you are burning, bright, never wavering. And you have fulfilled this role beautifully. You have saved people from rocks they never knew were there. You have been the fixed point in someone else's chaos more times than you can count. This is not a small thing. The world needs lighthouses. The world needs people who can hold steady when everything else is falling apart. Your capacity to function independently, to solve problems, to carry on when others would quit, this is evidence of a resilience that should be honored. It speaks to a strength of character that was earned the hard way through circumstances that demanded you become stronger than you should have had to be. But here is the tragedy that lives inside the triumph. Here is the thing that makes you lie awake at night, even as others praise your strength. The lighthouse stands alone, always alone. It guides every ship to harbor, but remains fixed on its outcropping of rock, surrounded by water on all sides, unreachable. The light it gives to others never warms the lighthouse itself. It illuminates the darkness for everyone except the one providing the illumination. You have spent so long being the person others lean on that you have forgotten how to lean. You have become so practiced at giving support that you no longer know how to receive it. The strength that saved you has become the thing that isolates you most completely, because people see your competence and assume you don't need them. They see your independence and believe you prefer it this way. They see you handling everything and never imagine you might be drowning beneath the surface. And you have encouraged this perception. You have perfected the art of seeming fine. You have learned to wear your exhaustion like an invisible cloak, to smile through the fatigue, to project capability, even when you're running on empty. This is not dishonesty. This is survival. This is what you learn to do to stay safe. But it means that even when people want to help you, even when they care deeply, they don't know how to reach you through the walls you've built. You are tired in ways that sleep cannot touch. This is the exhaustion of holding a pose that was never meant to be permanent. The exhaustion of being the strong one, the capable one, the one who never breaks. You have given so much of yourself to others that you have forgotten to save anything for yourself. You have been running on reserves for so long that you no longer remember what it feels like to be full. And still you cannot ask. The words stick in your throat. Your hand reaches for the phone and then stops. You type out a message, "I'm struggling today, could we talk?" and then delete it before sending. The shame rises up, hot and choking. What would people think? That you're weak, that you lied about being okay all those other times, that you're not who they thought you were. But here is the truth you need to hear, even if you cannot yet believe it. You are not machine. You were never meant to be self-sufficient. Human beings are not designed to carry everything alone. We are built for interdependence, for sharing the load, for taking turns, being strong and being held. Your refusal to ask for help does not make you strong. It makes you exhausted. It makes you human, pretending to be something more than human, and the pretending is killing you slowly. The fact that you never ask for help does not mean you don't need it. It only means you learned a long time ago to be silent about your needs. You learned to translate "I need help" into "I can handle this." You learned to swallow your vulnerability until it became a knot in your chest that never quite dissolves. You learned to be alone with your pain because that felt safer than the risk of showing it to someone who might not understand. But silence is not strength. Solitude is not independence. And carrying everything yourself is not what you were meant to do, no matter how good you've gotten at it. So how do you remove armor you have worn so long it feels like skin? How do you learn to need again when needing has always meant danger? The answer is not what you might hope for. It is not dramatic or quick. It does not involve a single moment of breakthrough where everything suddenly changes and you are healed. The answer is smaller than that, more patient, more terrifying in its simplicity. You begin by allowing a single crack to appear, not a demolition, not tearing down the walls all at once and standing naked in the ruins, hoping someone will find you there. That would be too much, too fast, too frightening for a nervous system that has spent decades learning that vulnerability equals danger. Your body would resist, would flood you with panic, would rebuild the walls overnight out of pure self-preservation. Instead, you start with something so small it barely counts. Something so minor that it feels almost silly. But this is precisely the point. You are not trying to prove you can be vulnerable in the big ways. You are trying to teach your nervous system slowly and gently that asking for help will not end in abandonment. That needing something does not make you unlovable. That other people can hold a piece of your weight without collapsing under it. You ask someone to grab you a glass of water when they're already in the kitchen. This is nothing. You could easily get it yourself. You've gotten your own water your entire life. But you ask anyway. You feel the discomfort rise in your throat, the immediate urge to say, "Never mind, I'll get it," but you don't. You let them hand you the glass. You say thank you. You notice that nothing catastrophic happens. They don't think less of you. They don't seem burdened. They might even seem pleased to do this small thing for you. Your nervous system takes note. The equation it has been running, asking for help equals danger, receives a small piece of contradictory evidence. Not enough to override years of programming, but enough to introduce doubt into the certainty of the old belief. You do this again. Different day, different request. You ask a coworker if they can cover a meeting because you need to leave early. You feel the shame trying to rise, the voice that says you should be able to do everything, that asking makes you incompetent. But you ask anyway. And they say yes, easily without judgment, as if this is a normal thing that normal people do for each other, which it is. You are the only one who thought it wasn't. You tell a friend when they ask how you are that you're actually having a hard week. You don't go into detail. You don't unload everything. You just offer this small truth instead of the automatic "I'm fine." You watch their face. You wait for the discomfort, the withdrawal, the subtle message that you've said too much, but it doesn't come. Instead, they lean in. They ask what's going on. They offer to help or just to listen. And something in your chest loosens just slightly. Each of these moments is a message sent to the frightened child inside you. The child who learned that needing was dangerous, that vulnerability meant abandonment. With each small act of asking, of admitting you're not okay, of letting someone help you with something minor, you are showing that child, this time is different. These people are different. It's safe to need here. You will not be punished for being human. The healing is not linear. Some days you will manage to ask for what you need. Other days the old programming will win, and you will isolate again, defaulting to the familiar safety of handling everything alone. This is normal. This is expected. You are rewiring neural pathways that were laid down decades ago. The old roads are well worn and easy to travel. The new ones are barely visible paths through undergrowth. Of course, you will keep finding yourself on the old roads. The point is, noticing when you do, and gently without judgment, choosing the new path when you can. You practice saying "I need" without immediately following it with "but I can handle it." You practice admitting when you're overwhelmed without rushing to reassure everyone that you'll figure it out. You practice sitting with the discomfort of being seen in your struggle, of letting someone witness you when you're not okay, when you're not the capable one, when you're just tired and human and in need of help. This is harder than anything you've ever done, harder than all the years of carrying everything alone, because at least being alone was familiar. At least self-reliance was something you knew how to do. This letting people in, trusting them with your weakness, believing they will stay, requires a courage you didn't know you needed. The courage to be soft in a world that has demanded you be hard. The courage to need in a life you've built around needing nothing. But here is what happens slowly if you keep practicing. The armor begins to lighten, not all at once, but piece by piece. The weight on your shoulders distributes across multiple people instead of resting only on you. You learn that other people are stronger than you gave them credit for, that they can hold some of your pain without breaking, that they actually want to help you the way you've always helped them. You learn that asking for help is not the end of your strength, but the beginning of something else, something that might be called connection, something that might be called love, not based on what you do, but on who you are, something that might eventually feel like coming home after a lifetime of standing watch alone in the dark. Real strength is not the ability to need no one. Real strength is the courage to say, "I cannot do this alone," and trust that someone will answer. Trust that you are worth answering for. You have spent your entire life building bridges for other people to cross. Bridges over their doubts, their fears, their moments of crisis. You have been the solid ground beneath their feet when their own ground was shaking. You have been the structure that held when everything else was falling apart. This is what you know how to do. This is the language you speak fluently. Now it is time to allow someone to build a bridge toward you. This is not betrayal of who you are. This is not weakness masquerading as growth. This is the completion of something that has been incomplete your whole life. You were never meant to be only the giver, only the strong one, only the person who needs nothing. That was a role you took on out of necessity, not nature. Underneath the armor, underneath the competence and capability and self-sufficiency, there has always been a human being who needed the same things all humans need. To be seen, to be held, to be allowed to rest. The armor served you well. Let this be acknowledged. It kept you safe when safety was not guaranteed. It gave you the strength to survive circumstances that might have broken someone else. It allowed you to become someone reliable, capable, worthy of trust. None of this was wasted. None of this was wrong. You did what you had to do with the resources you had. But what once saved you is now the thing preventing you from living fully. Because life is not meant to be survived alone. Connection is not a luxury reserved for people weaker than you. Need is not a flaw in your design, but evidence of your humanity. The fact that you require help sometimes, that you get tired, that the weight becomes too much, this does not diminish you. It simply makes you real. And being real, being fully human with all the vulnerability that entails, is the only way to experience the kind of love that isn't conditional on your strength. The people who love you do not love you because you never need anything. They love you in spite of the walls you've built, the distance you maintain, the way you deflect care, even as you provide it. Imagine what might be possible if you let them love you not around your armor, but through it. If you let them see the parts of you that are tired, uncertain, overwhelmed. If you gave them the gift of being allowed to give to you the way you have always given to them. Asking for help is not an admission of failure. It is an admission of being human. It is not a burden you place on someone else. It is an invitation into your inner world, into the truth of who you are beneath the performance of being okay. It is a way of saying, I trust you enough to let you see me. I trust you enough to believe you will not use my vulnerability against me. I trust you enough to need you, and trust after a lifetime of not trusting is the bravest thing you can offer. The armor has kept you safe, but it has also kept you alone. Alone with your exhaustion, alone with your pain, alone in the quiet hours when everyone else has gone home and you are left with only yourself and the weight of everything you carry. This loneliness is not noble. It is not strength. It is simply what happens when you build walls high enough to keep out hurt but discover too late that they also keep out love. So you begin to lower the walls, not all at once, not recklessly, but deliberately, carefully, with the same determination you once used to build them, one stone at a time, one small act of vulnerability at a time, one moment of letting someone help you, of admitting you're not okay, of allowing yourself to be seen in your humanity rather than your capability. And what you discover slowly is that the world does not end when you need something. People do not abandon you when you show them you're struggling. The love you were afraid to test turns out to be stronger than you imagined. Not perfect, not always enough, but real in a way that performance never allowed you to access. Beneath the cold metal of the armor you have worn for so long, there is a heart that has been waiting to be warm again, waiting to be touched by the kind of care you have spent a lifetime giving to others, waiting to discover what it feels like to be held, to be helped, to be allowed to be weak and still be loved. Connection is the fire that can finally warm you. Not the distant warmth of being needed by others, but the direct heat of being known, of being seen in your struggle and not being asked to hide it, of being tired and having someone say, "Rest now, I'll carry this for a while," of being human and finding that your humanity, complete with all its needs and vulnerabilities, is not too much. It is exactly enough. It is exactly what makes you worthy of love. The armor protected you once, and for that you can be grateful. But you are safe enough now to set it down, piece by piece, day by day, until what remains is not the fortress you built, but the person you always were underneath. Soft, human, allowed finally to need, allowed finally to be held, allowed finally to come home to yourself and find that you are not alone anymore because you have given others permission to stand beside you in the warmth of your truth.